5 planting beds. If you're applying the overhead spray and you're watering it on the same zone as the lawn and you're watering your planting beds as frequently as you're watering the lawn, you're giving even just regular plants, I'm not even talking natives, just regular plants, 6 times more water than they need. And you're watering 100% of that soil surface. You have created every perfect condition for weeds to grow. You are accidentally cultivating them. So if you want to control that, you got to cut those factors back.
We've even talked about where we're pruning. If you don't want to have to prune every month, don't water it so much. I mean, it's just easy.
Oh, excessive growth.
Water is a way to control
unnecessary
growth.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, and then pruning. So when we talk planting beds, the biggest mistake I see is people making the planting beds narrow because they, again, believe that they will have to do less weeding. But the quiz question I like to give is this. Are you ready at home? Take your notes. If you plant a shrub that wants to grow 4 feet wide into a planting bed that is 2 feet wide, how wide does the shrub grow?
4 feet wide.
4 feet. So you're trading. So yeah, when the shrub's little, it's a little bit less work. But as the shrub grows, now you've got to start hacking it back in order to be able to mow around it. And the more you prune something, the more you encourage the growth. Everywhere you cut that off, you're going to get a couple more buds, 2 or 3 new branchlets that want to form. It becomes this whole swirling toilet bowl of work that the more you do it, the more you have to, the more you have to do that, just switch. Yeah, you're not cutting down your maintenance. And so instead, just make the planting bed a little bit wider. Run drip irrigation so you're only watering the plant. Let that shrub grow to its full width and let those branches grow all the way to the ground, because then they'll also shade the soil, and that will further discourage weed germination. So we have what we call the Localscapes weed control recipe, and this is the best way to minimize weeds. So the very first step, of course, is that we're going to water with drip irrigation. That's just the biggest part of it. You're going to add mulch, 3 to 4 inches. Now, most of us are adding mulch to make the soil look pretty and brown. Mm-hmm. No, this is mulch with a functional purpose. We want to add 3 to 4 inches. And if we do the 3 to 4 inches of mulch, we do not use weed barrier fabric. In fact, we try to not even call it weed barrier fabric because that leads people to think that it is a weed barrier. And anyone who has owned it for more than a couple of seasons knows that's a big fat lie. Right. So weed barrier fabric will kill the soil and is really bad for the health of the soil. Yeah. We only use that fabric in places we're not trying to grow plants. So under like a gravel path or a gravel parking area.
That's what it's designed for.
Right.
I don't know who started doing it with the other stuff. But
yeah.
But they found a new market. So
yeah.
Like, oh, we could brand it. It's the exact same stuff.
Yeah. And that's been really a controversial recommendation, but everyone that does it and follows all of the steps has found a dramatic reduction in weeds. And the other thing, of course, is, you till that bed and do that the very first time you're planting. And then after that, don't do that again.
So no till.
Yeah. We prefer to not till, because if you're adding that mulch, you're getting the benefit in the soil, and you're feeding the microbial life and the worms and things, and you won't need it.
Tilling will actually encourage weed growth.
Yeah, it's going to bring a fresh crop of weed seed to the surface.
Yeah.
Tried to explain that to my spouse when we first got our house. He's out there just tilling to beat the band. He's thinking that he's getting all these weeds out. I'm like, you are bringing up more weed seed.
Yeah.
And finally I had to give up and just go, well, he's also burning calories. So
there we go.
There's that.
Kind of funny about weeds is in the beginning of our home, I thought I would fertilize with cow manure and horse manure, and it was not composted correctly.
Oh, shoot.
And so the next year, it was just massive amounts of perennial weeds, annual weeds. Anyway, long story short, 240. It was a mess. 240, baby. No, just kidding.
Yeah, and so we basically, if you do these first 4 things, you really shouldn't need a lot of chemicals. We don't want people to feel guilty if they're going to use them if they've tried other things first. I certainly still use Roundup or whatever else in my yard from time to time, but I try really hard to not need it. It should be the last step, not the first thing that you grab to.
We had some questions, and it was like, how's the quickest way to get rid of weed? And we're just like, pull it. Gone. But when you have a whole freaking thing, it's a little...
Yeah, so I tell people, I call it the roots and shoots balance, just understanding how that works, because then it helps people understand how to strategize getting rid of their weeds. The top growth of the weed, well, at any plant really, but it's the green stuff makes the food. The root system absorbs the nutrients and stuff from the soil, water, air, some of that air penetration in the soil, and it stores the food. that is created in the leaves. And so the plant is really motivated to keep a balance. If it gets out of balance, it can't do well. So if it gets too much top growth for the root system, that's a problem. If it has too little, vice versa is also a problem. What you want to do as a homeowner is disrupt that balance as much as you can. So especially for a weed like, let's talk field bindweed, because that's everybody's. If I had a nickel for everyone that's like, how do you get rid of it permanently? I'm like, dude, if I had that answer, I would be so rich.
Yeah.
Like we would not be having this conversation.
And that's the morning.
Yes. So morning glory
field
is
bindweed, same thing. Okay.
Same thing. Morning glory is one of the common names. Field bindweed's a little more accurate on the common name, but either one. But here's the key with that particular weed. This is why it's so pernicious, is that the seeds are viable for 50 years and the roots can be 14 feet long. Going to get rid of it, but you can control it and you can exhaust it. So when it comes to bindweed and some of these other weeds like white top, I basically say it's like Survivor: outwit, outlast, outplay. In the early spring, when it's just first coming up, it's been using, that root system is still there, that great big root system, but it doesn't have all of the leaf growth at top. So it's pushing out the growth as fast as it can so it can restore the balance between the roots and shoots, so it's not curving into its stored energy to keep it going. So when it first is growing, it has to use that. So what that means is that the plant is pulling the energy deep into its root system. So you're going to use a chemical, that's the time to do it, because that's when you're going to get the deepest kill. When summer comes along, it's the opposite situation. The plant's not trying to extend or grow that much. It's really just trying to kind of keep things going. And that's why you see like the morning glory gets really stringy, right? So that's kind of that initial thing. That's when you don't want to bother with the chemicals. And it's harder to spray it that way anyway, because they're not going to be sucking it down into the root system. It's not even going to do anything. So in the summer or when the temperatures are warm, that's when you want to just hand pull it. But the key is consistency. Because you've seen it, you pull it, right? And then 2 weeks later, it comes back. And not only did it come back, but it's like thick and lush. And so you might be tempted to think, oh my gosh, I did that and it liked it. But actually, you should be really heartened when you see it come back really thick like that, because that means you've put it in stress. Its roots and shoots balance has been disrupted and it can't make the food it needs. So it's trying to use its stored energy to push those leaves out as quick as it can to start making food again. If you quickly let it get maybe an inch or two, then pull it again and just keep that up. So it's the second or third pull is where you're starting to get the kill. Now, if you wait too long in between, then it's rebuilt its energy supply and you're back to square one. So through the summer, you outlast it. And eventually, it doesn't have the storage to keep playing this game.
So just keep pulling, keep pulling.
And then in the winter, right before winter, late fall, that's when you can start with the chemical treatment again, because again, it's like, oh, winter's coming, got to store up what I'm going to need to get going next spring. So it's pulling that down deep into its roots. And again, you'll get that deeper kill. So that's kind of the secret. So chemicals don't work all year. They're best in the spring, the cooler seasons.
So worst case scenario for weeds like that are persistent is if you didn't pull it in time, it flowers.
Don't ever let it flower.
Seeds. Yeah, and then now it has resown itself in the soil, and you have those for up to 50 years.
Yeah. So you're pulling grandma's weeds.
Yeah, you're pulling grandma's weeds. Come on, Grandma.
And good news, the kids will be pulling yours. So.
Oh, good, yeah, good point. No, I like that. Disrupt the cycle and be persistent.
Yep.
And continuous throughout the season.
Keep it off balance, and if you do that, you'll decrease the amount of it in your soil, right? Once it's run out of energy and it just kind of shrivels, that's down deep dead, right? So the more we can do that, and if you're consistent with that over, and it might be two or 3 years of being really good and consistent, you'll find you don't have that much of it. And that's the other reason to not till up the soil or disrupt it, right? Put that heavy coat of mulch, get the bed prepped, kill out as much weed as you can before you plant it. And then once you've planted it and put that mulch on, try to minimize how much you're going to be disrupting the area. The great thing too is those, because weed seed's still going to blow in from other places, but if it blows into that thick coat of mulch, it's really loose and it's easy to pull the weeds while they're still, somewhat small.
Well, and that mulch will also help prevent the weed seeds that need to germinate with light. Is that
right? Yeah, because and that's the thing with the weed barrier fabric. People think it's a physical barrier, but the way it works is it really just prevents sunlight from hitting that top layer of soil so that the weeds don't get the light they need to germinate. You can do that exact same thing with mulch. The difference is 5 years later, if you've used mulch for that purpose, you have the healthiest soil you've ever had. And if you used weed barrier for that purpose, you have the sickest, gray, no microbial life, no worms kind of soil. And your plants are hanging on, and their roots are going to grow really shallow to the surface because they're going where the air and water is. And that's at the surface.
How can people find out more about this?
Okay, so Localscapes classes are taught statewide. So what's really cool about Localscapes that's different than what we've tried before is once we got so excited, our team got so excited, like, this is the answer, it's working, and we've tested it in our own yards. We were our initial guinea pigs. And, most of us are not getting rich doing this. The horticulture industry is not exactly flush with cash. So we've had to do it in phases our own selves. We run into the same problem. So I might know what to do as a landscape design person. Doesn't give me the budget. I'm in year 10 on my yard, and I got 4 more projects before I have it where I want it to be. Mm-hmm. But I also have a plan that I'm enacting, and I know that each project I do is getting me closer to that ultimate goal. So, that's just part of the direction we want to head.
Wow, that's awesome. So you have help, though, too. There's programs.
Oh, yes. So statewide. So we realized we have this cool answer, but we could never even begin to teach everybody. And, man, I bet other people would like this, too. So we pulled in some of the other teaching gardens in the states. Although, let's have a moment of silence for the loss of Central Utah Gardens.
Spiritu Santo.
La benedición.
Luckily, they're still teaching classes, though. So they don't have the garden, but you can still get the classes in Orem at their new building. We have the Weber Basin Learning Garden up in Layton. And then down in southern Utah, it's actually been really kind of fun. Ryan White down there in southern Utah has adapted the Localscapes content to match their climate.
No way.
So it's still the same 5 steps, but they're going to use maybe a few different materials that are more indigenous to that area and use some different plants. But the layouts, the design that you learn through Localscapes is the same. It just has been localized to southern Utah.
And that's
cool.
the Red Hill, what is it?
Oh, yeah, the Red Hills Desert Garden.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Stunning.
So cool.
I've been there like 3 or 4 times. We actually saw a tortoise when we went there last time.
I know. I get so jealous because they're
The
setting.
desert tortoise just cruising along.
Well, it's right next to one of their
conservation areas.
Yeah. The little fence that's like a foot tall, so they can't climb over it.
My favorite thing down there is they have these 6-foot-long hanging swings that face out. So you've got this gorgeous red rock behind you, all these beautiful red rock formations, and then the view is across the entire city of St. George.
Oh, cool.
And you can sit there at sunset and rock in those swings. I'm telling you.
It's gorgeous.
It's so beautiful.
Every time I go down, I
it should be extra beautiful this year, too, because of all the rain and really good year down there. So everything should be extra floriferous. Mm-hmm. That's just across everything. So let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really easy for people to say, oh, we got plenty of water, so I don't have to worry about conservation. Only 11% of the area of the state of Utah is even a place we can collect water from for our supply. And it's not like 11% of that water is even getting into our reservoirs. So the area from which we gain our entire water supply is actually relatively small. Most of the water that falls here and the snow and everything else is just going to stay in the environment. We've got to hoard what we have and what we've been able to collect. You wouldn't have food in your fridge and then go eat out of your food storage. And so in a year like this, where we have all this excess, if we're careful with conservation, we can rebuild some of what we've lost the last couple of years. Because if we'd had another winter this year like we did last year, I can't imagine that there wouldn't have been restrictions statewide. And so it's really important that we use the years of plenty to build up that supply again and rebuild that reserve so that we keep it as top off the tank.
Well, and I've noticed that, and I know that Lake Powell is not necessarily for our water use, but it definitely helps out down the road. But
that one's in a chronic state of low. Because of just different things that are being impacted from other states and stuff. So, we just want to be smart about it. We don't want people to feel guilty. It's kind of the use only what you need thing. I know that's a saying from Denver Water, but we all wish we thought of it. But it very brilliantly says it. Just use what you need.
Just
and
use
not more.
what you need.
If I install a Localscapes, how much percentage-wise would I be saving in water?
Yeah, so we did some surveys, some studies, and let's take a 1/4 acre lot because that's a typical lot size. I know lot sizes are shrinking, but generally speaking right now, 1/4 acre. And what we found was the average 1/4 acre lot that people are watering everything the same with overhead spray, whether it's lawn or plants or whatever. And some people say that people use 50 inches. We went with the number 40. We felt that was a more accurate representation of 40 inches of water per summer, which is a lot. Okay, so when we calculated what that is, and it came out to 196,000 gallons and some change to water 1/4 acre